Hi y'all, Billy here. Welcome to the Messy Studio. This is part 6 of So You Want to Turn Pins. In this episode, I'm going to turn a synthetic. This happens to be Lynn Lacey acrylester from Wood Turnings. Some of the hardest and most fragile of the resins I've encountered. And I'll show you some ways to deal with that. But first things first, we need to mark it, cut it, and drill it. So let's get to it. When I'm marking resin to cut, especially stuff that is as brittle as this, that has a tendency to blow out, I like to mark it 1/8 to 1/4 inch oversized. And the reason I cut it 1/8 to 1/4 inch oversized is because when I go drill it, I'll have a mark on the bit that's only a little over the length of the tube. That way I don't actually blow through the bottom of the blank. Then when I get it drilled, I'll come back over to the bandsaw, mark it, and cut it off. That way I don't blow these things out. I've blown too many of these up. So I've got my mark, let's cut it. I may find a use for that later. And as with all blanks, I always use a center drill.
And with this stuff, it's important that you clear your chips often. And you go slow, but not too slow. You do not want to overheat this stuff. Keep checking your bit, feel the temperature. Because heat is the enemy of synthetics. Before I get carried away, I gotta turn my mark right and see it. See my mark? Yes, I'm taking a while to do this. I've blown too many of these up. And you know what they say, an ounce of prevention. That got a little warm. I went a little too far. And a little too fast. One more pass and that'll get her. Because I'm not going all the way through. That's it.
See, I didn't go all the way through. Nice straight hole. Tube should fit fine. Bit's not hot. We're good. Now let's go scuff the tube and glue it in. If you remember, I said before I put this tube in, and see, I've got plenty of clearance down inside there. You should be able to see where that tube is. I've got about that much too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the tube up here, give me about a 32nd of an inch, make me a mark, another 32nd of an inch. What I'm going to do is cut this off, everything that side of the pencil line. See that perfect divot? I got about that much room there. Yeah, I've got about a 32nd on each side, which is just the way I want it. So let's glue it up. Remember, before we glue, we have to scuff the tube. You saw my other pen making episode, you saw where I just take this old Allen wrench, put my tube on it, set it up here and let it dance. Do a quick scuff, turn it over, repeat the process. Scuff tube. Now we'll wipe it down with lacquer thinner to remove any oils from the factory when it was pressed through the dies, and we glue it in. Got the tube cleaned off with the lacquer thinner. It's been known for many years now. This is going to be a little translucent, and it's been known for quite some time that synthetics, mini synthetics, when you get them a little bit thin, you can see the brass tube. Well, we don't want to see the brass tube, so we have a few options. One option available to us, and the best option, and you'll notice, and you'll see this if you'll watch Lynn's video, and I'll have a link to that down below. The best option is to coat the inside of this with paint. In the case of a synthetic, this color, black would be okay, brown would be okay, copper would be okay. You don't want to see the hit or miss of the brass showing through. Well, I don't have any paint right now to paint the inside of this blank.
But I do have a brown Sharpie. And because I'm dulling the shininess of the brass down with this brown Sharpie, where it does get thin, you won't see a glaring brass tube in the background. I've done this for many years, it works just fine. A couple of spritzes down the blank with a spray can would be faster, then you gotta wait for the paint to dry. With the Sharpie, by the time I get my epoxy mixed up, it'll be good. Oh, you're not seeing what I'm doing. I'm holding it where I can see it, not you. Sorry about that.
So I got another tube here just to show you. This is what it would look like if you didn't color it. This is what it looks like colored. Now you can paint the tubes themselves, not just the inside of this. You can actually paint the tube instead of using a Sharpie. But like I said a while ago, I don't have any paint. right now. And I've always used this successfully. So let's mix up some epoxy and glue this baby in.
What's that? Yeah, I hear you. Billy, don't you think you're using a little too much epoxy? Yeah, for one tube. I'm gonna do two. I got something else going on. You want to mix this stuff real good. This is 5-minute epoxy. You can get it from any number of suppliers. Don't get it at Lowe's or Home Depot. You can't get big enough bottles and they cost too much. Okay.
Now it's time to glue them in, but before we do that, I like to run some epoxy on the inside of the blank. Roll the tube in it, twist it as you go into the blank. When you start running out of epoxy on the tube, use your little stirrer and slide it up. Twist it in, slide it up. Now I'll actually use the stick to push it in flush. Wipe off my excess. Make sure it's flush all the way around. I'm running epoxy out the back, which is good. That means what the tube didn't leave in between itself and the blank came out. I'll hit this with a reamer and get rid of the rest of the excess epoxy, but that's no big deal. Now we set it aside, let it dry. I'll be back when it's set up. Now once you have your tubes glued in.
Who does this bloke think he is? Captain Kangaroo Jack Sparrowhawk?
Whether you're using thick CA or epoxy, either one, very often you get some residual glue inside the tubes. Well, that's not a big deal. Now the pin kit suppliers make a single-use tool for getting that glue out of the tubes, or a kind of a reamer. And y'all know how I feel about single-use tools. All you need is a cheap little $5 pocket knife. Let me show you. See a little bit of glue down in there, we'll get rid of that. Flip it around, do the other side. And now we're ready to mill the ends of the blank. You got the shine. And we're good to go. Now let's get them turned. And I'm going to show y'all how hard, this is Inlace Acrylister if you remember. I'm going to show you how hard this stuff is. You see all those chips flying off of there? They're flying at me too. Uh-oh. Big chunk. It's not too big, but it's big enough. I told you this stuff is brittle. You know when resin's cutting right because it comes off in shavings. And it really wouldn't matter. You see all these holes? And there's that chunk that blew out. That could have been disastrous. I'm also going to show you that it wouldn't matter whether I was using the skew or a rough and gouge. You get the same basic stuff coming off when you first start turning this down. So, I'll show you a little trick. Because of the way this stuff chips, especially down at the edge, right here like that did, you've got to be real careful. So what I do is I'll use my small skew like a negative rake scraper and come in and pare these corners down. Now I'm getting more of a, you see I'm getting more of a ribbon type of shaving like you're used to seeing people have that fly all over the place with this resin. If you cut it too aggressive or use too sharp an edge, it chips, it doesn't cut. You can see from this, a whole lot different than this. It's cut. Now, because I've got this down on this corner, my chances of blowing the end of the blank out are greatly reduced. So let me knock this other one down too. Now see the shavings, the ribbons, that's the way it's supposed to turn. You know you're cutting good when you get ribbons. Don't ask me how many of these things I've blown up. Which is why I started taking these corners down first. Took some experimentation to figure out what I wanted to do, but this works best. New Sierra bushings. These are starting to get a little worn. Alright. Now let's see if we can get some. See, now I'm getting more of a ribbon because I've reduced the angle of my cut a little bit. And I'm taking a little bit of a smaller bite than I was at the beginning. I just wanted to show you how you got to be careful with this stuff. And when you hear that shh, you just got bubbles. Trying to stay out of the way of the camera. Makes it hard. Nice ribbons. See, there's still a few of those little blowouts there from where I took it a little too hard. When you hear that it's because it's doing that. It's chipping out instead of cutting ribbons. You don't want to hear that noise. Put my billy bumps, as the guys at the IAP call them. That one can go just a little deeper. This resin really likes scrapers, so it don't hurt to use one. on that sharpness off just a little bit. Let's see what we got. You see all these lines and stuff? Maybe some chip out. I need to take care of it. I don't know if that was a blowout bubble or air bubble left in the resin. Could be either one. All these discoloration lines, we don't need to worry about those because those will micro mesh out. What won't micro mesh out are chip out bubbles, unless they're really, really small. That would work out, but just to be safe. Doggone my high-tempered soul. That got him. I'm going to hit this straight away with 240, I'm sorry. Well, you didn't ask for it, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. See this sanding disc? Don't buy bargain stuff you see online. Just go to Kling's Store and get the good stuff. It'll last you 3 times as long. Yeah, it costs you maybe 2 or 3 cents a disc more than this cheap crap, but you'll be a lot happier. I can't wait till this is gone. I'm going back to Kling's Store and I'll never change again. My sandpaper did that to me. Cheap crap. micro mesh should get that out. Don't buy cheap sandpaper. Just don't do it. Yeah, that looks ugly, but the micro mesh will get it out. So let me get set up for micro mesh, and we'll be back and finish this thing off. Okay, it's time now for micro mesh. I'm going to start with the 1500. And go all the way to the 12,000. I start by soaking them in my little tub of water. I've got a backer that I use it's a piece of an old mouse pad. It's important to always use a neoprene backer with micro mesh, especially when it's dry. The kit comes with a 3x4 block of neoprene about like that. It's really important to use it. It's also important to keep your micro mesh cool and not overheat it. I started back with 400. I didn't like those lines. Even though I dry sanded it with 400, it left some scratches in it. Move it to a fresh spot. See, I'm up to 3,200 now, and you can still see a slurry. You can still see that slurry. I mean, just cutting. And I don't spend as much time on these higher grits as I did the lower, but it's not necessary. Still see a slurry. A lot of people think micromesh doesn't do anything but burnish. It doesn't cut. Well, that slurry tells me otherwise. $6,000. You can already see the slurry. Burnishing won't leave a slurry. $8,000. See the slurry on the 8,000? And 12,000. And you can see a slurry here too. Not as much of one and not as significant, but you can still see the slurry. And that's not bad, but it can be better. So, for my final step, I use Novus 2 plastic polish, fine scratch removal. I've read that doing this, once you've micromeshed, actually takes it down to a more coarse grit. Well, technically and according to the data sheets, that might be true. But you saw a bit of a haze left on that blank, or at least I could see it. You won't see one when I'm done with this Novus. Now, a lot of people use Plastex. I've tried it. Now, a clean part, buff all the residue off. See that shine? I didn't get that off my micromesh. remove my water protection. See that shine? That's pretty. Clean the ends off. Get all that residue off. Let's go put it together. Sierras are actually pretty easy to put together. First thing we're going to do is take these two press pieces that I made out of some scrap oak and corian. I made them to fit on here. Like I said, the Sierra is actually pretty easy to do. Put the refill in the bottom. Put the transmission on, or in, and then screw it together. And make sure it screws up snug. The newer ones, this is an older kit, the newer ones are better than the old ones, and you see it works. So that part's done. Now we take the blank and we have to figure out which of these ends we want the clip in. And where we want the clip. This is probably the most dull, not as in not shiny, but the least figure of this particular resin. So I'm going to put the clip there. And you see it nearly pressed in all by itself. But I want to make sure that it's seated nice and snug. And it is. And now you simply by hand push this on, and there's your completed pin. This happens to be the satin gold, and I think it looks really good with this particular Inlace Acrylister blank. Nice and shiny, ready to go. So there you have it. Pin number 2 in my So You Want to Turn Pins series.
I guess he decided to trim that troublesome tribble that was hanging upon his chin.
Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're so inclined, or if you've seen something here that interests you. Share with anybody you think might be interested, and come back and see us. Thanks again.